All right, we're going to go ahead and start the final session for the Urban Landscape Summit. My name is Erin Harlow. I will be your moderator. And just for clarification, I did not spread doveweed across the state of Florida. Okay, thank you, Ryan. So that was not me. I was in Jacksonville, but yeah, it wasn't me. And then I did want to kind of just comment on Stacy's question that she had earlier about how do some of our landscape professionals get this information. And I just wanted to, this is kind of leads us into our next talk actually by Brooke Moffis. And she'll be talking about future ecological landscapes, proposed strategies, and their perceptions. But she's actually giving this talk, is it 2 weeks? At the beginning of May at the Southeast Pest Management Conference for us. And there's usually around 100 or so landscape and pest control professionals. So she gets an hour to kind of cover similar material to them. So we have been prepping them and getting that information out. So with that, Brooke, we're very excited to hear about your future landscapes.
Thank you, Erin. Very excited to be here. I have been blown away by the presentations over the past 2 days. So thank you everybody for your talents and just your efforts. So I am an extension agent, commercial horticulture and Florida friendly landscaping. I've worked with extension for about 15, 16 years now. I can't believe I'm saying that. And I'm also a PhD student with the School of Natural Resources and Environment. And I am one of Dr. Basil Iannoni's students with the School of Forest, Fisheries, and Geomatic Sciences. So again, talking about future landscapes, proposed ecological strategies, and their perceptions. So let me tell you where we're going first. I'm going to talk about the situation here in Florida, Future of Urban Landscapes Collaborative, our multidisciplinary projects that we have going on in Lake County and in Central Florida, a multi-species lawn project, native plant edging project, and then another project that I'm just getting started, which is identifying challenges and opportunities for future urban landscapes. And then, like all the other talks, we'll open it up to suggestions. So our situation, we have about 900 residents that move to Florida every single day. And that's according to 2019 and 2021 data from the Florida Department of Financial Services. And Dr. Johnson said yesterday that we had about 1,200 people that move to Florida every day. So with this, we have residential landscapes, and that they're one of our most rapidly expanding land uses in the United States. We have these homogeneous, highly maintained landscapes with a lot of water demands. 50%, an estimated 50% of residential water use goes to landscape irrigation. And the Central Florida Water Initiative says once we hit that 850 million gallons of water per day withdrawal, we're maxed out with our groundwater withdrawal before we start to see detrimental effects. So, also another thing that I'm really interested in is habitat loss. We lose more species to development and invasives, or at least that's the leading cause. The leading cause of species loss is development and invasives. So can anyone tell me where this picture was taken? If you have good eyes, you might can see the writing in the bottom. Any takers? Anywhere in Florida? Yeah, this is in the Villages, and I'm rather fond of the Villages because it's where I cut my teeth as an extension agent. But if you notice the pickleball court there and the recreation center. But I want you to take a closer look and see how many species you can identify in this picture. It's a little hard. This is, a little challenging. Someone said 4 or 5 species, about 10 species. Yeah, I would say probably 10 species or less, right? We see some zoysia grass, Asiatic jasmine, sable palm, live oak, some date palms in there. But anyway, this is just to kind of bring that point home that we have these very homogeneous landscapes. And then I wanted to talk to you about the Future of Urban Landscapes Collaborative. To address some of these water issues that we have and habitat loss, a diverse group of IFAS professionals came together for a 3-year collaborative process. And Brian, Dr. Unruh mentioned this earlier. So one of the goals from this and one of the things that came out of it was they created a shared vision of a more biodiverse, more resource efficient landscape of the future. They also identified gaps in knowledge and gaps in research related to sustainable landscaping and novel approaches to landscaping. So it's really resulted in more multidisciplinary projects that are being conducted from various IFAS departments. And I just wanted to, I always am amazed at the breadth of knowledge and the territory that we cover within IFAS. I just recently found out after working for Extension for 16 years that we have a microbiology and cell science department. Who knew? So anyway, you guys probably knew. But anyway, if you check out the departments that I have with the red asterisk, those were the ones that were involved in the full collaborative process: ag and bioengineering, ag education and communication, agronomy, cows, entomology, environmental hort sciences, forest fisheries and geomatics, School of Natural Resources Environment, and so forth. So the big question that I want to answer, or I can't say answer, but contribute to, is how do we design, construct, and manage these residential and urbanizing landscapes for resource efficiency and to support biodiversity? So my research projects really originated from that full collaborative full collaborative process to address some of these research gaps. And then also we have prominent growers in Lake County where I serve as an extension agent, like Cherry Lake Tree Farm. I know Tim Salon's here. It's one of the largest nurseries in the entire Southeast. We also have Green Owl Gardens. It's a premier native plant center. And we have a landscape architecture company, My Dragonfly Gardens, that are all in South Lake County. And I know they're interested like me in how native plants will grow in the urban landscapes and what role they can play in urbanized areas. So, and also I'd like to point out that Lake County has a landscape ordinance where for new developments, 50% of the landscape plant material has to be native. All right, so that leads to the first project. And some of you have heard this talk before, maybe a little different spin on it today. But anyway, that's our multi-species lawn project. And this little project really helped me get started with my PhD. For those of you that remember Lloyd Singleton, he's a mover and a shaker and a creative thinker. So he asked me if I would take this project on and host it at Discovery Gardens. And I thought it was pretty cool. So I said, yeah. But anyway, our study objectives with this is we wanted to look at the effects of plant diversity on lawn resiliency, which we measured with % green coverage. We wanted to look at other forms of biodiversity. When we increase plant material biodiversity, how does that impact insects? Homeowner perception, as Augustine said earlier, if the homeowner doesn't like it, it's not going to fly. And we want to look at feasibility. Do some of these species, or are these species going to play nice together? Is one going to outcompete the other species? Will they tolerate routine mowing? So those are some of the questions. I'd like to start out and thank the Center for Land Use Efficiency for the funding for this project. And these are all the contributors. We have ecologists, entomologists, turfgrass specialists, master gardener coordinators, graduate students, and master gardeners, and we couldn't do it without those master gardeners. So our experiment was for treatment 1, we had Bahia grass alone. Treatment 2, we had Bahia grass mixed with 4 flowering forbs. And when I say forbs, I think sometimes horticulturalists don't use that term. So forbs is an herbaceous plant that flowers. And then treatment 3, we had 4 forbs. They all received the same water and weeding, and we only watered to establish. And then after that, we watered the plots about 4 times within a 2-year period for survival. So we didn't water for aesthetics, we watered for survival, far less than what the typical lawn would receive. So we didn't fertilize them and we did not apply pesticides. The mowing did differ though. We mowed the Bahia grass once a week, the blended plots once every 2 weeks, and the forbs was only as needed. This is just a snapshot of the project. We did do a randomized block design. And then the selected species, we chose Bahia grass because it's extremely drought tolerant. It has an open habit to where we could get some reseeding from some of these wildflowers. And it can tolerate higher mowing heights too. And then the wildflower species that we selected, Phyla nodiflora, Salvia lyrata, Mimosa strigolosa, and Coreopsis leavenworthii. And we selected these species because they're attractive, because we thought they could tolerate routine mowing, and they were also structurally different and their blooms were different as well. So we thought that might increase the biodiversity that we saw in the plots. Again, we're looking at public perception, resiliency with the green coverage, pollinator visits, arthropod abundance, and just the management of a blended system like this. So for our pollinator visits, we actually measured the activity. So we measured each time a pollinator landed on a flower, that counted as a visit. If it lifted off and landed again, it counted as 2 visits. So the same pollinator could be counted over again. We just kept it very general and broad groups so our master gardeners could easily identify them, and myself too. And we did butterflies, honeybees, carpenter bees, bumblebees, other bees, wasps, and flies. So those were what we were looking at. And then this is one of our master gardeners, Ashley, and Ashley's looking at the plot for 5 minutes and recording what she sees. So for pollinator visitation, we have collection date and month and year on the x-axis, and we have the number of visitations on the y-axis. And quite simply, the more forbs that we incorporated into the plots, the greater visits that we had by our pollinator species. And then June was the time of increased pollinator visits, and then it would taper down in the fall and in the winter. And then we looked at 3 different functional groups of ground-dwelling arthropods. We looked at herbivores, and this actually made me have to flip my mind around a little bit because I'm a trained horticulturalist. Leaf chewing is bad. And so, but I've had to, change that mindset when we try to, do these more ecologically diverse landscapes and are growing for the pollinators. So we looked at herbivore richness and abundance. We looked at predators, and we looked at detritivores as well. So with our herbivore richness, and let me explain richness too. It's the number of different species in a given area. Abundance is the number of individuals. And a similar story to the pollinators with the herbivore richness and abundance. As we increased the forbs, we had more richness and abundance of the herbivores. But very interestingly enough, we did not see differences in the other arthropod communities. So no difference with the predator insects, no difference with the detritivores. And we think that might be because the plots were fairly close together. So we might have been sampling from the same community, or it could be that there really was no effect, but it's something that would need to be studied further. So for plant cover and resiliency, we had about 5 to 20% higher green coverage in the plots with forbs during the summer, and about 30% higher green coverage with Bahia grass plots during the winter. So really the forbs and the grasses contributed to cover at different times of year, but it is important to note that Bahia grass and forbs offered a consistent coverage. So public perception. We analyzed or surveyed 55 people in March and November of 2020. So we actually hosted the Florida Nursery Grower and Landscape Association Action Chapter meeting at our extension office. And 2 days later, what happened? We shut down. So that was March 10th. So we were able to get that collection data in, but we weren't able to get more perception data until November of 2020. So I've actually since then have actually done surveys 2021 during the middle of the summer when we had a lot of biomass in the plots. And I did that with pest control operators, but I don't have it included in the survey yet. But anyhow, we had the Florida Nursery Growers Association members and their guests, folks that attended the Master Gardener plant sale, and some of the Master Gardeners that didn't know anything about the plots. So 37% lived in an HOA, 84% lived in Florida for more than 10 years, and 70% maintained their own yards. And they all received limited information about the project. To the majority of those surveyed, attracting pollinators and reducing inputs were important to them. So this is just to show you when we did our first collection date with the surveys, it was shortly after this. So this is this winter dormancy, which is a challenge for growing in this type of blended system. So let's see what folks said. For the front yard with Bahia grass alone, they were 61% somewhat likely to extremely likely to use, again, in their front yard. Bahia grass mixed with forbs, they're about 31% somewhat likely to extremely likely to use. Forbs only about 18% somewhat likely to extremely likely to use. And in the backyard, we had a little slightly different story. In the backyard, 52% said they were somewhat likely to extremely likely to use Bahia grass. And then Bahia grass mixed with forbs, we had a 33% were somewhat likely to extremely likely to use, followed by forbs, where we had about 26% somewhat likely to extremely likely to use. But like I said, we still have a bulk of these surveys to analyze. So just a quick summary of that project. Plots with forbs demonstrated increased pollinator diversity and increased pollinator visits. Arthropods, we had a higher abundance of herbivores in plots with forbs, but no other effects across the taxa. And then for coverage, plots with forbs had higher coverage in spring and summer. Turf grass provided more coverage in the winter. And then perception, about 30% were somewhat likely to extremely use Bahia grass mixed with the forbs. All right, so moving forward, we need to think about feasibility. We had a really hard time with challenges from weeds. We had a lot of weed competition very early on in these plots, and we were hand weeding and hand roguing. That's never going to work in the field, right? How many people are going to get down there and hand weed that plot? So I'm wondering if we could experiment with pre-emergent treatments. Maybe we put down a pre-emerged treatment that we can establish the plots, and by the time the wildflowers reseed, it may be faded. We have greater or broken down, I should say. We have possibly could do greater plant densities. And then we need to think about irrigation needs. Again, we irrigated for survival, not necessarily aesthetics. So we might be able to irrigate a little bit more at critical times to help with the aesthetics there, and still greatly reduce the amount of water that's being applied compared to what a typical homeowner would do. Select more low growing and flowering plants. We could determine BMPs for this. And again, we need to analyze more of that perception data. But there is some commercial interest. I had the pleasure of touring around Green Owl Gardens and Cherry Lake at our turf plots. And shortly after I did that, Green Owl Gardens had this Facebook post where they're experimenting doing a wildflower sod. Now, I would love to think that that one little visit influenced him to do wildflower sod. And maybe it did, but maybe he's been thinking about this for years and he saw our plots and thought about it in a different way. So, but that's still exciting. All right, so the other project I wanted to talk to you about, it helps further address some of these gaps with knowledge gaps that were identified by the full working group. And that is this native plant and urban soils project that we have going down at Sunbridge. So, and again, this is a big interest to Lake County growers. And, you know, native plants are often promoted because they are said to support birds and insects and other wildlife, and natives are becoming more requested and sought after. And so what we want to do is we want to take these native plants, but now we're growing them in a very unnatural environment. These are highly urbanized soils. So these are soils that suffer a lot from compaction. They're poorly drained due to that compaction. They have high bulk density, which really can limit root growth with that soil, and then high pH as well. So we know pH is, you know, in the upper 7s and maybe even around 8. So how are these native plants going to survive in this type of situation? And are there ways that we can alter the urban soils to improve plant health? So we're looking at amending with compost, and actually Life Soils is here, Mark in the back. You'll see you'll be in a picture here coming up soon, Mark. Oh joy, right? All right, but anyway, so you know, can we alter these urban soils to improve the plant health, to reduce water needs? And then also we're just monitoring for survivorship too. We're growing a lot of unusual plants that are not typically grown in the landscape. So let's see how they survive. I'm really excited about this project because of all the players involved. We have Tavistock Development Company. And I think Jennison pointed out that they have a 36,000 home build out. And what happens in our project is going to influence what they do in the landscapes for these 36,000 homes. So there's multiple schools within UF IFAS, University of Central Florida. That's actually Patrick Bolin and Mark Russell from Cherry Lake. And they are looking over some of the plot plans when we did our plot setup. And the Nature Conservancy is also involved as well. And oops, okay, something's weird there with the font, so please excuse that. But anyhow, you've seen this picture before. Jennison showed you yesterday. And it's kind of funny because this picture was taken on March 22nd. And I was actually out there in the plots doing data collection. So I tried to blow up this picture to see if I could see me somewhere out there. I might have been hiding in the tree in the shade. Maybe I was taking a break somewhere. I couldn't find me. But anyhow, so my plots are this, oh, wow. Okay, this little L-shaped area right here. So what's cool about these plots is they really function as a landscape feature. They were designed by Cherry Lake, but they also they are also a controlled experimental design as well. So, oh, and more about Base Camp. This is the welcome area for the Sunbridge. So they have some yurts, they have this events lawn. And so we'll actually be touring people this Saturday, April 23rd, into the plots and telling them about the project. And then this is the split up wildlife management area too. So I think with this project and this development, they're really feeding off that this big development is going to butt up to this wildlife management area. All right, so these are the metrics that we're looking at. We're going to have a water as needed versus scheduled watering. We'll have compost amendments versus urban only soil. And then we're going to look at pest and disease presence and pressure, visual quality. So we're doing a rating system, much like the turfgrass growers do. And also Sandy Wilson and Gary Knox do this visual quality metric as well with some nursery plants. And then we're going to look at survivorship And we'll look at coverage of the plots with drone imaging. So Stacy Strickland from Osceola County is going to help me out there. But have you ever seen research plots that were this beautiful and this type of landscape design? So I'm super excited about it. All right, and then this is me getting some bulk density or either soil pH samples, but I really wanted to show you the compaction that we typically deal with these highly urbanized landscapes. You know, bulk density, again, is so important for root growth. I could not get that soil probe 6 inches into the soil with all of my weight standing on it. So other soil metrics that we're going to look at is organic matter, carbon nitrogen ratio. We'll tease out a couple more of those macronutrients, pH, and plant available water. And then I wanted to show you the plant list that we're using. We have 26 native plant species. Some are commonly utilized, like yew-plant holly and firebush, but some are lesser known, like mistflower and little blue stem and rattlesnake master too. So let's see how these plants perform. And then this is a picture of the plot setup. We have our compost treatment. We tilled all of the plots so that they would all have the same tilling effect. There you are, Mark. And then we have Cherry Lake Tree Farm, and they're installing the irrigation. We were debating what type of irrigation to use on this project, but the members of our committee felt that the industry is going more towards drip irrigation, so that's the way this project needs to go to. And then the last section that I'd like to talk to you about is I would really like to define the opportunities and challenges of sustainable and ecologically diverse landscapes. So in order for us to move towards increased sustainability, we need to be able to know and define the points of view, the points of contention. We're going to be doing interviews and focus groups of interested parties, and we'll be doing qualitative evaluations of those interviews and focus groups. So, and then we're just really starting to delve into this realm. We've got the other one project, the data collection's completed, the Sunbridge project, we're just starting to collect data. And then this one, we're just kind of wrapping our heads around and thinking about. So I would like to thank you for your attention. Here's my contact information. And then what questions do you have? Any questions? Bueller? I just blew you out of the water, or you're ready to go home. Go ahead, Stacy.
I'm curious about the first project where you had the forbs mixed in. Did you have any plots that weren't weeded, just to see what happens if you didn't hand weed?
We did not. Now we did decide. I'm sorry. Stacy's question was with the first project, multi-species lawns. Did you have any projects or any plots that you did not weed just to see what would happen? We did not. The weed pressure was so intense early on that we decided to go ahead and hand rogue them out. The weed pressure is going to be the biggest challenge with implementing this. We did decide though at a certain point so what we were doing initially is we were weeding. I mean, we were weeding for hours in these plots. And then eventually we said, no one's ever going to do this. So then we did 15 minutes per plot. We said, still, no one's ever going to do this. So then eventually, I would say probably about a year into the study, I could find an exact time frame. A year into the study that we're just going to stop weeding, But I think it's super important for the establishment period. That's why I think pre-emergence could be an option. Tim, you have a comment?
Yeah, I'll just point out that we actually did install or put in pre-emergent when we did the Sunbridge plots, and there has been next to no weed pressure since it was installed. And we installed, was it December or?
We put the plant material in January.
January. There's been no maintenance out there.
Right, that's true.
And there's hardly any weed pressure.
I'll restate that for those on Zoom, but Tim Sallin is here from Cherry Lake Tree Farm, and he was saying that they put out a pre-emerge in our Sunbridge plots, and we have had very limited weed pressure, if any, really. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, Susan?
I was a little concerned about the public perception audience being FNGLA chapter members and Master Gardener volunteers, and is that really considered the public or a typical?
Right. Yes, and they're visitors to our. I'm sorry. Okay, Susan asked. She was concerned about the bias that would be in our survey data, and that is one reason that we said we've got to capture more survey data, and one reason that we wanted to hit the pest control operators that attend. And we've also had FDAX employees and some landscape architects that came in to do the survey as well, but I haven't been able to analyze that data yet, so I'll get to that. But that's one of the things, but you're right, it was Master Gardener volunteers and FNGLA and folks that might already be oriented to that, so.
And plant
And plant sale attendees, yeah. So that was open to the general public, but then again, there are people that know about our events and are going to come to them. So, and we're trying to capture folks that visit the extension office. So I'm sure there's some bias in there too, but we'll see what the PCOs say. So question way in the back.
Yeah, so I was just looking at the Sunbridge as well. I think it's wonderful that, you know, there's going to be a community based off of native landscaping. From what I saw from the list though, yes, it's great that it's native landscaping, but what about in situations where it's minimized to those native plants and there is some of the loss of biodiversity because native plants that might be naturally occurring there before it's a community no longer have a space there? That makes sense.
Okay, so you're concerned about the diversity of native plant material that we have there. We've got the 26 species. Yeah, that's actually a concern that I hear from some of my advisory committee members. You know, they said, oh, I'd love to plant more natives, but they're just not readily available. So, but we are, you know, and you're right, we are, you know, adding these native species to that area. But we are, I think, really expanding with that list of 26, even though it's only 26, it's greatly expanded than the 10 natives that everybody uses all the time. I do have some concern with that with monoculture of native plants too, because we have Gulf mealygrass in our discovery gardens and we have a really hard time with mealybugs. So, you know, some probably invasive mealybug that came in. So yeah, I think we need to, there's a demand there, a desire there to see more native plants. And we really need to, you know, expand the plant palette even more. Okay, thank you.